Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Beto O'Rourke. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is, at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Folks, welcome to one more edition of Politics Done Right. I'm Egberto Willies, your host. Thank you so kindly for being a part of the show. We are going to have a great show for you today. We're going to talk about Trumpism. Yes, of course, we're going to talk about Trumpism, but not in that light. What we're going to do is show you or talk about how not interpreting what occurred, talking about interpreting Tuesday's election correctly. Absent interpreting Tuesday's election correctly gives us the possibility that all that was voted for, all that we supported, isn't really what we get. This is very important, folks. This is very important. What we have to start realizing right now is that everything is about narrative. Everything is about narrative. And that is what Donald Trump is an expert on. Donald Trump, hello, Teresa Pelsinski, and also Michael Dean Newton. Folks, if you're just joining us, please remember what we ask you to do right away is to go ahead and share the show. It's very important that you share it on your wall, on your Twitter feed, on your Facebook page, and everywhere else possible. That is the way we get throughput. That is the way we ensure that we have a whole lot of people listening to truth, that we have a whole lot of people listening to what's necessary for us to really make the change that we always talk about. We talk about change all the time. We talk about wanting to make a difference all the time. That will only occur. That will only occur if we really, really engage citizens, if we really engage and do our part. And our part means also not only making sure that we are informed, but making sure that all those that are not informed get informed. And you do that, again, by sharing real information. You do that by sharing truths. You do that by sharing sources that you have faith in, sources that you know are going to provide to people the education, the enlightenment, the truths that we all need. So, folks, if you're just joining us, please go ahead and share this program on your Facebook page. Please share this program on your Facebook wall. Please share it on your Twitter, Tumblr, Snapchat, Instagram, everywhere, because that is how we are going to make a difference. I promise you that is how we make a difference. Folks, you know this is also a call-in show. The call-in number is 646-716-5812. Again, that number is 646-716-5812. It's right there on the screen if you're looking at this at the screen. So please join us, folks. Anyhow, as you can see right now, if you take the temperature of the narrative right now, if you take the temperature, if you watch TV right now and you watch all the shows on, and I have to watch them all, okay? So I peek at them at different levels. But you take a look at Fox News. You take a look at CNN. You take a look at MSNBC, many pundits at MSNBC. And you take a look at all these other stations, CBS, ABC. They are actually telling you that what occurred on Tuesday, on Election Day, was a split decision. Oh, they kept the Senate and they may have gained a voice or two. But let me tell you, folks, that is not the case, and we cannot fall for that at all. We cannot fall for the lie that somehow this was a split decision. We cannot fall for the lie that somehow, half of one's a half dozen of the other. We cannot fall for it, because what happens then is when legislation is put forth there, they're going to say, we somehow have to go through some mythical middle. We have to look at the mythical middle. Well, Ari Melber did one of the best, and I'm going to play that in a minute. So get ready, folks. You're going to see a piece of video now that is going to blow your mind. The journalism that Ari Melber at MSNBC did to prepare this particular snippet. I cut some pieces out of it, or I cut it up, and I may break into it a few times. But this is an important piece that I'm going to show you, and I'm going to do this before I go into the blog of the week. I'm going to do this because, folks, this is something everybody has got to see, because most of the news had not been giving us the truth, or even if they've been giving us the truth, it's been slanted to some mythical middle. It has been slanted to make some people feel, okay, well, it wasn't a blowout on the left. They are so scared. Most Americans and most institutions are so scared of the left. And as much as most of what America wants are leftward policies, when asked them without giving them an ideological spin, that's what most want. So what I'm going to do is, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and play that. I want you to folks to listen to this keenly. Listen to what he's saying. Let's go.
Rejection of Trump broader than many D.C. pundits appear to realize, and this matters because the actual public support can shape what happens next. There was only one national race last night for the House where Americans in every state voted. The Senate, not a national race, most of its members not up for re-election. The states that did vote on senators have about 75% of the population. You see there, and overall, did you know that more people in those races backed Democrats by 15 points overall? It's the smaller states that went Republican that get the same number of senators under our Constitution. Now then, in the race that I mentioned, where every American can vote, the House, Dems winning decisively. At this hour, a 6% edge over Republicans. Now, when past presidents have lost the House, they admit it.
If you look at race by race, it was close. The cumulative effect, however, was not too close. It was a thumping. I said that the elections were close. The cumulative effect.
It's a thumping.
Thumping.
And
I'm not recommending for every future president that they take a shellacking like I did last night.
Trump refusing to do that, and he may keep lying about the results and using bluster to distract from this loss and trying to overwhelm the coverage of the Democratic victory with other moves like ousting his attorney general after the election. But that's Trump. What about everyone else, especially these self-declared experts on our elections? The fact is, this week, more Americans chose Democrats than Trump, just like they did in 2016, showing a consistent preference for Democrats and against Trump. This blue wave in the House was historic, and I don't mean historic as like a debatable adjective. I literally mean historic in the sense of history. Take a look at Dem results in the past 40 years. This is the number of seats they won in every race, when they won any seats. And right here, this is what they just won this week. You are looking at a projected 35 seats, the largest gain for Democrats in 4 decades, which is more seats than the so-called thumping in 2006. Headlines were blaring that was a wave of voter unrest and Democrats wrested control from Republicans. It's more than any other election since the Democratic wave against Nixon, who was historically unpopular because of his criminal presidency. That is a big headline this week, even if some people don't want you to know it. And the D.C. pundits who underestimated Trump before he became president through the Electoral College, you may have noticed this. Now they're overestimating Trump. They're underestimating this blue wave. And pundits keep talking about this divided result. The Washington Post called this a split decision. That's one angle that Fox News has seized on.
It was not the blue wave that a lot of people predicted.
Big picture, David Gregory, the fact that there's this divided result.
You've got, divided government, which is a very American reality situation.
Voters were not divided this week.
I want to add something there because Ari Melber, the one thing he just said there is that, well, that was Fox News who kind of spun it differently. It was not just Fox News who spun it differently. It was just about every single network. I just wanted to break in there to make that little change to what Ari Melber said there. It was all the networks that did that, but let's continue.
Most chose Democrats. It's that simple. But D.C. cliches can overwhelm simple facts, like the cliche that American politics zigs and zags in presidential races. You've heard about that, the idea that our electorate is a kind of a presidential pendulum, and we hear so many declare America is divided and centrist.
America, the country, is as divided as it has been in 150 years since the Civil War.
Whatever happens, whoever wins, whatever the people want, I don't think they're going to get because people are so frustrated in this country.
But Americans have not been going back and forth when deciding which party should win the White House. Voters preferred a Democrat for president in 6 of the last 7 presidential races. Here's the popular vote margin in the 90s, big and blue with Clinton as president. In the 2000s, voters preferred Gore. Then Bush did win the popular vote in 2004. And voters preferred Obama twice in a row and preferred Clinton last election when Trump did win the Electoral College. You see what you had up on the screen with all that blue? That's not a zig and a zag. It's mostly zig. This fact is staring us in the face, even if it doesn't fit that DC pundit narrative. It's obviously also much bigger than Trump. When the American public votes for president, it's not a center-right country. More people pick Democrats most of the time. And in the legislative branch, the Senate's not a direct democracy. It is weighted towards small red states. Meanwhile, politicians have rigged the House. They use gerrymandering, so they pick the voters instead of the voters picking them. Remember when the electorate went peak Barack in 2012? Americans voted to re-elect him by about a 4-point margin, and they voted to back Democrats for Congress by about 1.2 points. But those rigged, gerrymandered districts overruled that big blue popular preference you just saw. And then the very politicians who rigged that outcome come out and they claim they won popular support. Cue the self-interested, swampy pablum about, yes, divided government.
The American people have spoken. They've re-elected President Obama, and they've again re-elected a Republican majority in the House of Representatives.
That was 2012, and the American people did speak. They said they wanted Democrats to run the House. Instead, they got Boehner. Now, none of this changes the practical fact that the GOP held the House in 2012 under the rules when they got fewer votes, or that Trump is president despite getting fewer votes. Any lawyer can tell you if you control the rules, you're more likely to win. But when all these pundits and experts march across your screen, they aren't talking about who won. We already know that. They are declaring what the people want, what you want as voters, and what has a mandate, and whether real America backs Trump or Clinton or Boehner or Obama, and they're shaping what this system we live in perceives as possible. So why do fact-free cliches about divided America endure? Well, a lot of people, including those of us in the media, we live inside the rules of our politics, and it gets uncomfortable for some when we have to admit that this system in our Constitution is not a democracy, that the person who comes in second can end up running the country, and the people who win more votes, millions more votes, they go out and give speeches and get lectured about how to handle their loss gracefully when they actually won more support from voters. And this gap between what Americans vote for and what the elected branches do, this goes beyond candidates. Take an example we all know about that's relevant tonight. 9 out of 10 Americans support gun background checks. The Senate rejects those checks because the Senate's not responsive to 9 out of 10 Americans. It's tilted towards tiny states. Now, when that happens as a reality, you don't stand back and say, well, I guess the American people don't want background checks after all. We must be a center-right, anti-background check nation. Golly. No. Obviously, the takeaway is the Senate does not reflect the public's view. It is blocking that. And if that's so clear, why do so many people act like Trump had more support in 2016 or Boehner's side won in 2012 or this week's giant blue wave, what you're looking at, a 40-year high, wasn't as big as it was? Well, I think partly because this is politics, so there are powerful agendas behind the propaganda. And second, it's human nature to want the plot to make sense. So Al Gore has to be a loser, even to many Democrats, because considering the opposite, that the wrong guy took charge and we're living in an alternate universe, that's too much for some people to bear. We are living right now through an era of tremendous civic strain. I think we have too much politics in the sense of endless spin and battle, and way too little democracy in the sense of the popular will shaping what our government actually does. That is an uncomfortable dynamic, to say the least, which is why when you bring up the popular vote, try it at a party. People end up fighting about whether Al Gore and Hillary Clinton were great candidates. Maybe they weren't. But that has nothing to do with the growing democracy deficit in our country, which is not about personalities. A system that repeatedly overrides the voter's preference, your voting preference, is likely to stoke division and eventually, if that continues, to undercut its own legitimacy. A big reason America is especially divided is that the voting opposition to Donald Trump was larger than the support for Donald Trump from his first day on the job. He entered the White House with the lowest support of the voting public of any president in history, a trend that continues on to this week with what we showed you tonight, a 40-year record blue wave in the House. Some of these factors are unlikely to change. The founders did deliberately make the Senate undemocratic. But some other factors have to change. If voters want the House of Representatives to be democratic and not be a rigged, gerrymandered public farce. And as with so many crises in the Trump era, the first step on all of this is getting our facts straight.
That was pretty evident. What I mean, that was some of the best written journalism I've seen on MSNBC, on any of these channels, because it put it all together. It put the picture perfectly so. So what I wanted to ask you guys to do, first of all, is if you're just joining us, please remember the only way we are going to get truth across is if we all make sure to make all these programs seen by many. So please go ahead and share this on your Facebook page, your Facebook wall, your Twitter, Tumblr, everywhere, because we have to get this information. But what the point of what he's saying is so true. The narrative defines what gets done. And right now, even as we've just had a monumental win, not only in the House of Representatives, but all down in policies. Like I said yesterday on my KPFT show on 90.1, KPFT 90.1 FM in Houston, like I said there, we won, meaning the progressives, the Democrats won so big in parlance of Donald Trump, so bigly. It is something that we should have been screaming out. But what occurred, and I'm going to say this again because there are new people that are coming in, and also new people that probably didn't hear the show yesterday or the day before. The media decided that there were going to be 4 stars that were going to determine the bellwether: Stacey Abrams, Bill Nelson, Andrew Gillum, and Beto O'Rourke. And so far, Beto O'Rourke has lost, but we are not sure about the other 3 because there's a whole lot of machination and voter fraud, not voter fraud, but probably voter detention. All of that's going on, so we don't know about the outcomes. But let's assume all 4 of those were lost. The reality is that what we won was so much bigger, and I gave the example of just Harris County, the county where I reside, where we got taken over, where the progressives, Democrats, took over the entire slate, all the judges, all the at-large positions, except for 1 or 2, or the little quantity. But the reality, it was a sweep. It was a wipeout. It was such a wipeout that some Republicans got so mad. One Republican judge got so mad, he just released all the folks on without bail. Just released them because he was so mad, and he had some kind of claim like, well, he had a silly claim that he made. But the idea that I'm trying to tell you here, folks, is it was a wipeout. And that the mainstream media is not covering it as a wipeout is malpractice, is fraudulent. And what we saw Ari Melber talking about, I was so happy to hear that, because it is so important. It is so important that what we do is to tell the truth. And not only that, but make Americans aware of it. And why do I say make Americans aware of it? This is why it's so important. As Ari said, if for some reason the perception is that this was an election that occurred down the middle, that this was an election that the left didn't trounce the other side, then when they're coming out with policies, they'll try to make it seem as if, well, it was sort of a even draw, so we have to kind of compromise on X, Y, and Z. When, of course, the right never compromises, but that is what they're going to want now that they've lost the House. But worse, it even gives folks on our side, meaning on the progressive side, the false impression that they need to do more compromising than they need to because of the representation. Now, Ari Melber gave some important information. 6 of the 7 presidential elections, the will of people voted for Democrats. People voted for progressives. 6 of the last 7. How comes we had, in those terms, 3 of the 7 governed by Republicans? How comes we constantly do? Likewise, we pointed out that the amount of folks that voted for the senators, even in this election, even though there were more Republican senators who won, the amount of people that voted Democratic in senators way outpaced those who voted for Republicans. Likewise, in the House, the amount of people that voted for Democrats and progressives way outpaced Republicans. It's no contest. There are more Democrats, there are more progressives than there are Republicans. So we have, when I talk about there being a defect in the Constitution, some people get on my case and say, well, the tyranny of the majority is why we have it set up that way. In other words, the reason we have a permanent undemocratic society, undemocratic society, is because of the tyranny of the majority. There's no tyranny of the majority in America. We have a Bill of Rights. For people who don't understand the Constitution, I really suggest just take a refresher course. Go to even Wikipedia. The Bill of Rights is designed to protect against the tyranny of the majority. That's why they cannot take away your inalienable rights, of course. That's why there's freedom of the press. That's why there's freedom of religion. That's why there's freedom of all these things, that it doesn't, those things don't go to a vote. Your rights are not voted upon. Again, your rights are not voted upon at all. Everything else must be and should be democratic. The Constitution is flawed. There are processes that we can try to mitigate it, and in fact, we're doing it with there's an organization that is trying to, I don't remember the name of it right now, that is trying to tell folks that what we have to do is all the states come to an agreement, and it doesn't need a constitutional amendment, which in this point in time is almost impossible. Whoever wins the popular vote, these states agree to have a block decision to vote for the winner. That's the only solution that we're going to have, and that means for the Electoral College, that is. But it's important that we understand this is not a democracy, and we do, and based on the outcomes of our races thus far for the last several election cycles, except for one when Bush had his 9/11, except for that, we've had an undemocratic Congress and undemocratic presidency, because more people supported the other side, and they want to know, why is it that things are so stressed out? Why is it that people are so mad? Well, we understand that. Today's show, I really wanted to show that piece first because I thought it was very powerful and it was very instructive to a whole lot of people. But the show for today is called "It Cannot Be Denied That Trumpism Lost Big in Midterm 2018." You know, just to think about this, I'm sitting down here wondering, how come this particular show got a glitch in it? Am I supposed to get into conspiracy theories here? Seems like anytime I talk about a little topic and get a little bit deep, something tends to happen. But anyhow, let's go back and continue with the program. It cannot be denied that, there we go. Oh, bear with me, folks. I'm having some technical issues. Okay. Title of the show is "It Cannot Be Denied That Trumpism Lost Big in Midterm 2018." And the subtitle of the show is, "While Trump Attempts to Spin Midterm 2018 as a Victory, It is Clear the Opposite is True as More Races Continue to Fall to Democrats." Trumpism growth is done. I know a lot of folks don't quite believe it, but I'm telling you, Trumpism is done. Yes, it still has a good percentage of white America, a very small percentage of all the other, what did my friend tell me? A lot of other identities, America, but it is dying because people are starting to see the real truth. Anyhow, Trumpism is not dead, but it is starting to get exposed. I'm starting to see overt Trump supporters starting to take a second look. The fact that Beto O'Rourke did well in areas he wouldn't otherwise have, it validates that story. And what happened? Rene Perpetua, it seems like there was some sort of glitch with I think it's either Wirecast or I'm not sure exactly what caused us to have to flip to another channel, but we did. So it kind of messed with the flow of the folks who were reading before. I hope that they realize that they can always go ahead and do a refresh and start watching on another channel as well. But anyhow, do you know what time it is?
It's time for the weekly blog post.
Okay, the blog post today isn't mine. The blog post today, the blog of the week today belongs to our good friend, Robert Reich. And and the reason I decided to just do it is when I saw the Ari Melber piece, right? I said to myself, you know, I love the piece. And then I saw the Robert Reich piece. You know, I like to read Robert Reich's blogs every morning or so. And when I saw the piece, I said, you know what? That's what I'm talking about today. I don't need to write a blog of the week today. I've got good old Robert Reich, Clinton's former labor secretary. And, you know, I've interviewed him several times on Move to Amend Reports, where I did a show for Move to Amend, and I have that interview in the archive somewhere. If you go to politicsdoneright.com and search for Robert Reich, you can hear the interview that we had a few times. Actually, I think I interviewed him twice, one with Coffee Party and one with one with Coffee Party USA and one with Move to Amend. But anyhow, the title of his piece is America Rejects Trumpism, and here it goes. Make no mistake, America has rejected Trumpism. They have rejected Trumpism. No one seriously expected the Senate to flip because Democrats had to defend 26 seats in that chamber compared with only 9 held by Republicans. But I want to remind you what Ari Melber said in the piece we did previously. And he told that truth that said, in as much as all these were in red states, a lot of them were in red states, the amount of blue votes that came to vote for those senators way exceeded the number of conservative votes. So remember that in as much as they won the Senate, most of those Senate seats, that's exactly the truth. Small states somehow get bigger control in our government. No one seriously expected the Senate to flip because Democrats had to defend 26 seats in that chamber, compared with only 9 held by Republicans. The real battleground was the House, where Democrats had to achieve a net gain of 23 seats to get the 218 needed for the majority. And guess what? They did, but not only did they do it, they exceeded everyone's expectations. And so far, we are at around, the expected amount is about 35. Many believe it's going to exceed 35, which definitely makes it a blue wave. Trump wasn't on the ballot, but he made the election into a referendum on himself. So Americans turned against House Republicans, who should have acted as a check on him, but did nothing, in many cases magnifying his vileness. The nation has repudiated Trump, but do not believe for a moment that our national nightmare is over. Trump still occupies the White House and in all likelihood will be there for 2 more years. The Republican Party remains in control of the Senate. Fox News is still Trump's propaganda ministry. The line between Fox and Trump, already blurred, vanished completely at the last election rally when Fox host Sean Hannity and Jeanine Pirro joined him on stage. The American people will be subject to more of Trump's lies and hate as amplified by Senate Republicans and Fox News. Trump can be expected to scapegoat House Republicans for anything that goes wrong. American politics will almost certainly become even meaner, coarser, and uglier. We will remain deeply and angrily divided. I want to stop the blog right there, and I want to add something here because Robert Reich is correct when he said it's going to get rough and Donald Trump is going to blame everything on Congress. Now, and not only that, electing a Democratic Congress potentially makes it easier for him to win re-election, assuming that things, assuming things crater and he finds a way to blame them. And that is why I think Democrats have constantly made strategic mistakes. As an example, I've been talking about this at the Daily Kos for a long time. the economy that Trump is, Donald Trump was left a very good economy. Obama left Donald Trump a very good economy. Now, in juicing the economy, he's done things like cut taxes and deficit spending, which really juices an economy. It really makes an economy keep going because, you know, this recovery is over a decade long, right? Now, that said, it is one has to ask the question, why Democrats were not preparing for a fall. What I constantly said is Democrats should have been preparing for a fall, but even before they got elected. This economy, as designed by the Republicans, will crater, and when we get in there, after it craters, when we get in there, we will have to fix it. Okay? We should have been laying the narrative, telling Americans that the economy is a false economy. It's not a real economy. And that as soon as we get in there, there's a good likelihood it's going to crater. And when it crater, just like we had to recover it in 2008, we will have to recover it in 2018. Now, why am I saying that is something that we didn't do right? What happens now is when the economy crater in the next 2 years, Trump is going to find a way to blame us for it, blame the Democrats for it. And in doing so, what do you think happens? Americans who are not very well read, many of them could actually buy it. Many of them could actually buy that because they were not prepared for the reality of what's going to occur. It is imperative for us as right now. It still isn't too late, right? We can have that narrative going throughout the blogosphere. We can have that narrative going throughout everywhere, throughout when you're talking to your people on Facebook individually. Hey, this economy is going to crater, and once again, Democrats are going to have to come and clean it up, but it's going to crater while they are in office. We have to start preparing Americans for what's going to happen. We can. We still have the time to do so. But the other thing we have to do is what a lot of people are going to want to talk about. Let's go impeach him right away and spend a whole lot of time on investigations and all of that. We have to work in parallel. We have to investigate, but we also have to make sure that the news media does not only cover investigations, because then Americans will get the impression that the only thing Democrats are doing is going into Congress for revenge, as opposed to going into Congress to govern. So therefore, whenever they start with, they should not really just jump into impeachment or jump into investigations. It is imperative that they have plans for infrastructure work and plans for medical care and plans for education, for relieving the educational debt. All these things are very, very important. They need to have a plan. They need to publicize it and say, this is what we're working for. And then they need to, since bills originate in the House, with big fanfares, they need to have these great names of bills that says relief for students, relief for Medicare relief, Medicaid expansion relief. They need to have all these issues in bills ready to go, sent to the Senate. Let it go to the Senate. And of course, most of the time the Senate is simply going to say no, but forget about that. You send the bills and you make it a national thing. You let everybody know we are working for the American people. And after you've done that, then concurrently, of course, in the background, your staff and everybody else, they're working the investigations, but they're doing it quietly. Americans don't need to hear about an investigation every day. They don't. They need to hear about when something substantive comes out, and you make that be once a week or so. Release your substantive stuff once a week, but every day you go in there. We're doing this for the American people. We're doing that for the American people. That is what we have to do. The Democrats have to play it smart. They have to play it smart. I don't care how left-wing you are, and that you know I am. It is not all that difficult to play it smart. Trump can be expected to scapegoat the Democrats. But look, most worrisome, America still won't respond to real threats that continue to grow, which Trump and his enablers have worsened. Climate change, the suppression of votes, and foreign intrusions into our elections, the most expensive and least efficient healthcare system in the world, and not least, widening inequalities of income, wealth, and political power. And those are the things that we have to track as well. Those are the things that we have to track. We have to make the narrative to fix these. Now, look, you go in the middle of Appalachia or in the middle of the ghetto or the barrio or whatever, and you talk about, oh, well, you know, there's income inequality and we need to solve this because we know that the marginal propensity to consume of the rich person is not really that high, and as such, we want to go ahead and give tax breaks. And we can't, even though everything that I just said was true, we cannot speak that way when we're talking to the people. We have to explain to them exactly what is income inequality in a representation of their own lives. Income inequality means that these people can't buy the things that they want, even as they see some people, a very few people, go ahead and fly their Lear jets overseas. They have to be told in things that they can visualize, that they can see, not an elitist marginal propensity to consume. I use those words, right? But later on, I am going to get a little bit more detailed and explanative. Anyhow, America will eventually overcome and reverse Trumpism. The harder challenge will be to reverse the reasons Trump and his Republican lapdogs gained power in the first place. Some blame racism and nativism, but those toxins have poisoned America since the founding of the Republic. That is one of the singular most important statements there, because I have some interesting issues with the way a lot of folks on our side try to say, you see, we told you it has nothing to do with economics. It's all to do with racism and nativism. Look, there's always been racism and nativism, but economic angst has a good way of giving a reason to justify them, justify your racism, justify your all your isms. An economic stalemate can do that in as much, and people need to understand that. Like I try to explain to a whole lot of my friends on the left, look, I'm a black guy. Do you really think I care about racism that doesn't materially affect me? Do you think if I care if somebody hates me because of my hue? Do you think I get upset because somebody doesn't want to be around me because of who I am, what I look like? I don't care about those things. I have a whole lot of friends. I have a whole lot of family. I'm a happy person. What I do care about, if there are policies that using those policies can hurt my personal economy just because of my hue. There's a big difference there, folks. There's a huge difference there. And I think that is something that all of us need to have a grasp with. You know, that they're sexist, that they're misogynists, as long as what they're doing don't affect your personal. You have no control of somebody's thoughts, their hearts, or anything. You can try to reason with them, but it is most important to look at policy. Policy is everything. Policy is everything, and that is why we, progressives, have got to be smart in the way we do things. We have to be smart. What's new has, some blame racism and nativism, but these toxins have poisoned America since the founding of the Republic, so they really can't be the sole problem. What's new has been the interaction between them and the long economic slide of tens of millions of working Americans, most of them white and lacking college degrees. You see, when you grew up in a society where everybody else was down but a particular sect was up, and that starts to change, you have to start asking yourself questions, and that is what happens. That is what happens, and that is where the angst come from. As Dr. Reich said, the racism and nativism has always been there, but what caused the eruption? Well, when these folks were doing good, they didn't have the time to realize that their supremacy was challenged. But when they realize that we're all in the same boat, that supremacy is challenged, and it's a feeling many had never had before. It's a feeling that suddenly they feel like they're being left behind. It's a feeling tempered by hate, tempered by racism, tempered by all the other isms. But we have to understand the pathology. They used to be the bedrock of the Democratic Party. Many of them members of trade unions whose strength in numbers gave them an increased share of gains of the economic growth. Right. You hear that? They used to be members of labor unions, and the labor unions used to fight for them. But guess what? These people allowed them. Willful ignorance is a dangerous thing, right? When the Powell Manifesto came out, and the Powell Manifesto started all its indoctrinative properties, and it started to teach Americans that labor unions were a bad thing. And you find that a whole lot of conservatives, a lot of poor white conservatives in these areas are no longer fans of labor unions, and realize that a lot of the angst that they have, a lot of the ripping off of their own personal economies occurred because their labor union lost strength or wasn't there at all. What they don't realize is much of their demise was self-inflicted. But how many want to say, my demise was self-inflicted? How many want to say that? Most simply want to blame somebody else. It's so much easier. And when you have leaders out there like Donald Trump who stoke that, hey, don't blame yourself. It is those people over there, those brown people, those foreigners, those Middle Easterners. That's a real problem. I had a meme placed on my wall today that said, which caravan did Ian come out of, the shooter in California come out of? Which caravan? All the shootings and all the killings and all the terrorism that has been occurring in the United States hadn't been coming from the Middle Easterns. It hadn't been coming from the Middle Easterns. You see, we've been distorting people's minds. Cognitive dissonance. We have to work on that. Their long economic slide has generated the kind of frustrations that demagogues throughout history have twisted into rage at them, meaning at the other. Meanwhile, most economic gains have gone to the top 1%, whose wealth is now greater than the combined wealth of the bottom 90%, giving them enough political muscle to demand and get tax cuts, Wall Street bailouts, corporate subsidies, and regulatory rollbacks. These, in turn, have created even more wealth at the top, but it also hurts the bottom. All were trends before Trump, yet Democrats fail to reverse them. Even though Democrats occupied the White House most of these years, and during 4 of them controlled both houses of Congress, still occurred. I want to digress from this for a second here, because this is what we have to watch. We got a lot of Democrats involved now. And what I told people is, don't sit down there and think, oh, great, Democrats are in power. Somehow things are going to be okay now. No, the job is just beginning, because the same plutocrats, the same people that corrupted the Republicans into being the type of politicians they were, the ones that extract from the few, from the many to give to the few. They're going to try to run the same number. Don't think because we have an Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's supposed to be a great old progressive democratic socialist, that somehow will most definitely stay clean. These guys are very convincing. They can even convince you that working with them is doing good for your constituents. So that is what programs like Politics Done Right, that is what we're going to have to be watching going forward. That is what we're going to have to be fighting for going forward, making sure that this new majority is actually representing the people. If you watch the Ari Melber piece again, and if you listen to what Reich just said, and that is, even though we had Democrats controlling things, much hadn't changed for the lower classes, for the middle classes. Much hadn't changed, even though we had the power to do so. Why? Because even those folks were under the control of the plutocracy. And that's what we have to mitigate going forward. That is what we have to do. So those of us in this field, those of us that are political activists full-time, those of us that are political activists part-time, we have to make sure that these people are kept honest. We have to make sure of that. Jobs may be back, but they are beforehand. Trump has worsened them by slashing taxes on the wealthy and corporations, whittling back the Affordable Care Act, and loosening restrictions on Wall Street. We knew that. Jobs may be back, but they pay squat, especially compared with the rising costs of housing, health care, and education. And they're less secure than ever. 1 in 5 is now held by a worker under contract, without any unemployment insurance, sick leave, or retirement savings. And folks, that is why we need to disassociate healthcare from a job. Everyone needs to have healthcare provided by a central government, period. That's the only way you have the freedom to do as you please, the freedom to create your own jobs, the freedom to do to start your family when you want to. Think about all these issues. It is so darn important. So anyway, continuing. Jobs may be back, the pay is squat, and they're less secure. 1 in 5 now held by a worker. They have no contract for sick leave, retirement, or anything else, which presumably is why Trump decided to focus the midterms on hate and fear rather than the economy. Exactly. Trump is a marketing genius. He's not very smart upstairs intellectually, but he's a marketing genius. He knew that the next question came. The economy is doing so good. How comes I am doing so bad? How comes I'm still trying to survive? How comes I'm still 2 or 3 paychecks away from the poorhouse? 40% 1 paycheck away from the poorhouse. How comes? So he couldn't go there. Economy is doing well for a few, but he couldn't go there. So what did he do? Hate. And you know, hate worked in Texas. That's the only reason O'Rourke lost. Hate worked. People in those rural areas were lining up. They were lining up. They had to stop that caravan. Those under, I don't want to, and this is not a pejorative, it's just a reality. Those low information voters in all our rural areas and in many parts of the city, they were scared of those people invading the country. Donald Trump said they were invading, so Donald Trump had to get every single piece of his army out. And that he did. He got his army out. Now, you know what? We have growth potential. He does not. We have a huge base that, in as much as we got our numbers way up, there are still a hell of a lot more progressives that could have come out and given the race to Beto without a problem, and given the race to Gillum, and given the race to Stacey Abrams, and given the race to Bill Nelson. It was there. Just wasn't used. So anyway, folks, they would focus here. He thereby created a large opening for Democrats aiming for 2020. They can become the party of the bottom 90% by creating a multiracial, multi-ethnic coalition to wrest back control of our economy and democracy. They would focus on 2 big things. First, raise the purchasing power of the bottom, go percent through, or rather, of the bottom 90% through strong unions, a larger wage subsidy, starting with a bigger earned income tax credit and Medicare for all. Second, get big money out of politics through public financing of elections, full disclosure of all sources of political funding, and end to the revolving door between business and government. Not difficult to do, is it? Democrats should try moving to the center. Huh? No. Democrats shouldn't try moving to the center. The center no longer exists because most Americans are no longer on the traditional right or left. The vast majority of Americans are now anti-establishment, and understandably so. The practical choice is either Trump's authoritarian populism backed by the moneyed interests, or a new democratic populism backed by the rest of us. A new democratic populism. Folks, you know, I have to go ahead and do this part here. We have to sustain ourselves, of course. So therefore, here we go. Politics Done Right needs your support. Politics Done Right is asking that you become a member, that you become a subscriber. Please go to patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Again, that is patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Please become a subscriber. That is the way we can keep doing what we're doing. That is the way we can make the difference. That is the way we can give exposure to all those politicians, the ones that can win, that don't get the exposure that they need. Here in Texas, we have a whole plethora of winning politicians who got a large voice out of many of these independent networks. Lina Hidalgo won her, it became the most powerful, a 27-year-old Latina immigrant from Colombia is the most powerful politician in Harris County now. She just won her election. She wasn't featured on ABC, CBS, NBC. Oh, no, now they want her. But the folks that gave her coverage were the small independent media outlet like us and others. That's where the coverage came from. Even coverage that these politicians that we have faith will make a change. Even though half the time they don't know or didn't know, we were covering them and pushing for them. We did. And the reason why is we understand there has to be a new paradigm. And that is electing people not who the business community wants, not who the corporatocracy wants, not who the political class wants, not who the oligarchy wants, but those who are going to go out there and work for the people. We elected in Harris County a swath of progressive judges, county officials, leading county officials, and we did that many of the times through independent media. Many times in this state, only the Republicans get coverage, but we gave progressives coverage, both in our writings, in our programs, and everywhere else. And now that they're elected, of course, it is our responsibility to keep them accountable so that the same cancer that affected the Republicans when they got into power doesn't affect the progressives as they get into power. You need the real watchdog, not the watchdog that is paid for by the same plutocracy, the mainstream media. Yes, they'll do some. Ollie Melber piece today was wonderful. It was great. I was surprised it made it on air. A whole 9 minutes of it made it on air. I was surprised. But we need that not once or twice a month. We need that every day. We have to be watchful every day. We have to have informants everywhere, every day, being able to bring this out. And there are several thousands that are going to watch this particular podcast in the blogosphere or rather this particular program in podcast form on the blogosphere. But we need support to keep this going. So please consider going to patreon.com, patreon.com/politicsdoneright, and become a supporter of our station. I tell you what's interesting. My next book is How to Make America a Utopia. And my teaser is subscribe. And as I release chapters, you get it before anybody else. It comes out online. And when the book is released, you get a full copy of the book. So go ahead, subscribe. Patreon.com/politicsdoneright. Now, folks, we're coming to the end of the show. We had a huge win. We had a very large win, a successful win. Under the lead of the president, or from the lead of the president, the mainstream media, and I'm not just talking about right-wing media, all media has started to buy in to the president's narrative as if this wasn't as big a win as it was. We cannot let that happen. We have to promote this stuff right through our own sources of information on your social media pages, on your emails. The most effective thing is an email from a friend. Let folks know we won. We won big, and we are going to make sure that those folks that we elected make the change that we demanded they make. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. You guys have a perfect, wonderful rest of the day. And you know how I end this, baby? I am out.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is the progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. Remember, you can also send me a tweet to EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is politics done right.
1, 2, 3, 4.